they go to pray for prosperity or plead for family member who is sick.
Tukunya ne a bayan gida. Yawa, kamar inda za ka dasa itace a bayan gida ko flowers. To shi za a dafa wuri. So in ka sami problem na wani ciwo ko fever ko wani abu, aka je shrine. Za ka je wurin Anambolo. Yawanci mata ne, to ita za ta je ta yi maka foreseeing na problem naka. Za ta duba. Yawanci ko ni za ta sa dawa, dama za ka kai dawa, a ja sa a cikin kwale, su sa a cinyanta. To ta yi wasu pronouncement, sai abin ya nuna mata cewa ga problem naka. In fever ne, za ta ce fever ne. Me ya cause din? In mayu ne, za ta gaya maka. In abin wani ne kawai baya son ka ko wani abu, za ta gaya maka. Cewa to abu kaza fa yana shi yake damunka. Saboda haka ga abubuwan da za ka nemo a zo a yi magani. To akwai wani za a gina ne, ɗan karami a gina wajen kamar haka, a rufe da sa ɗan kofa. To shi ma za a sa wasu abubuwa a ciki. In ka faɗi me problem naka, to ga shi wannan kwaryan nan wanda aka sa abin duban a ciki, wato price na dawa. To za ta yi wasu pronouncement, ta yi wasu abubuwa da hannunta, su ne za su gaya mata ga problem na.
In the 18th century, the Tangale people, Waja and Dadia, were the most feared people in the northeast because they were cannibal. There were rumors that in the Tangale land there are no graves because they eat even their dead. Before the coming of the white man into the land of Kaltungo, there is a culture they practice that makes them the most feared tribe in the region. Kolki is a kind of dance performed on a special occasion. The people has a culture of raiding against their enemies, or sometimes they do it just to show that they are brave. During the raid, when they kill a person, his head will be removed and will be placed on a family tree, while the body will be dismantled and divided to the family group. Even though the Tangale people were cannibals, they observe a certain restrictions. They will never eat the body of their own or of the section of the tribe which they recognize a treaty of brotherhood. At the coming of Kalel, the superintendent of Kaltungo, they arrived the shores of Lagos, November 20th, 1916. From Lagos, they took a train to Jos. From Jos, they begin the rest of their journey on foot to Miango, where SIM Rest House is located. Their luggages has to be carried by some hired carriers to Miango. On reaching the SIM Rest House at Miango, the two missionaries were welcomed by friends, where they stayed for 3 weeks while waiting for the government permission to travel to Kaltungo. Finally, the permission was granted for the two missionaries to travel to Kaltungo. On January 1st, 1917, by 6 a.m., John Hall and Gordon Beecham left Miango to Jos. In the second day, they left Naraguta, where they spent the night in Toro. From Toro to Kadawa, from Kadawa to Jama'a, Kasinawa to Maje, from Jela to Alkaleri, to Kwagel, Maimadi to Pindiga, where they rested for 2 days and they continued to Tal. They were greatly welcomed by the people there. On reaching Kaltungo, On the 17th January 1917, the missionaries were surprised to meet a welcome team of only 5 people, the Mai and 4 other members of the King's Men. But the missionaries were not discouraged by the cold reception. The magnificent transformation and transitional activities done by John Stevenson Hall and Gordon Beecham can never be overemphasized. The work done over 100 years ago is today evident in the life of the people of Kaltungo. A land once buried in darkness have seen the light. Its dark practices are today a mere whisper and legend. It all started with 2 brave soldiers who offered their lives to save a people known for dark magic and cannibalism. Mr. John Stevenson Hall and Gordon Beecham are the catalysts of that change. They did not only bring religion to the people, but an entire civilization. When the missionaries came to Kaltungo, they did not just preach Christianity to the people, but also they worked hard to preserve the people's religion, beliefs, ideas, and behavior of the Tangale people in the book titled Myth, Magic, and Religion of the Tangale People. The missionaries decided to start a school after seeing their progression. But the school had only 2 stable students, Karga, who was 22 years of age, and Kwanjum, who was 13 years at the time. In the same year, church service was inaugurated. Both the school and the church service were held in their living room. During the first service, the missionaries asked the few boys who happened to be the congregation to close their eyes for prayer. But the sound of that brought a serious laughter among the boys. The missionaries were ashamed, distressed, but they never gave up. John and Gordon's efforts were blessed by God when with time they were able to register up to 20 students who were taught how to read and write in their native Tangale language. Karga was the first person to come close to John and Gordon in their few weeks stay in the village. Karga has made a hazardous journey, and he was opportune to see white men from a distance walking on the railroad. John Hall described him as a man of about 21 years. After making their acquaintance, Karga agreed to help them with the Tangale language and collecting materials on the belief and customs of the people and training the native evangelists. He was of great help that Hall confessed that whenever Karga is not around, it is hard to find someone to replace him. He became the first Christian in the whole of Tangale land, the first pastor and evangelist. Together with Borio and Kwanjum, they preached the gospel of Christ to places like Billiri, Kumo, and even a larger area. Borio died in Kano. When John Hall left Kaltungo to Garko, Kargo became the church leader in the whole Tangale Waja. Karga died April 28, 1949 of tumor. Victoria Mott I. She was a deaconess of Boomed Avenue Baptist Church in Toronto. She was inspired by John Hall when she invited them to display their lantern pictures of their missionary activities of their 4 years in Nigeria. After that, Miss Victoria made up her mind to become a full-time missionary. She immediately prepared to go with them to Africa. She was a graduate of Toronto Bible College. Together with Mr. and Mrs. John Hall, they both sailed to Nigeria in May 1921. After stopping in Minna at SIM Language School and Missionary Headquarters, she arrived Kaltungo September 6, 1921. Together with Edith Edward Hall, she continued the school that was earlier pioneered by Mrs. Edith, and also she cared for cast-out twins and other children abandoned by their parents. When Mrs. Edith Edward died in March 4, 1925, John Hall and Miss Victoria Mott I were married in July 20, 1926, in Glasgow, Scotland. She supported her husband throughout the mission work in Kaltungo until when they left Kaltungo to Garko in Kano, February 4th, 1933. John Hall continued his work in Garko from 1933 to 1952. During this period of his activities in Nigeria, he conducted various studies on Hausa language. He published a collection of Hausa proverbs as well as Hausa hymns. From Garko, he returned to Kaltungo each year for Bible teaching ministry. In 1953, he left Garko for London, England, due to illness. John Hall died in London in February 8, 1953, and he is buried in Upper Norway Cemetery in London. At the opening of Kaltungo Hospital by Dr. Edward, a pediatric ward was built in memory of John Hall. Mrs. Maud Hall was invited to witness the occasion. Many of the Tangale people who knew her were overjoyed to see her. They urged her to come and work here in Kaltungo. After praying about it, Mrs. Hall decided to return to Kaltungo to work among the older people and visit the Tangale in the hospital. Mrs. Victoria Maud Hall died November 28, 1978 in Atlantic City Hospital, New Jersey. She was buried at Pleasantville Cemetery. Mrs. Hall have been a missionary in Nigeria for 48 years. Agnes and Margaret continued with their parents' missionary work, teaching in the school that was started by their mother, Edith Edwards, and also taking care of the sick up to the time when they left Nigeria to go back home for medical care.